Today is a very, very interesting day uh, because it's the day that we at the Temple of Miriam have dedicated to reading Parsha. It's Tuesday, and we read Parsha every Tuesday. The problem, and tonight's Parsha is called the Et Chanan, okay? And it's the second part of Deuteronomy. We've already entered uh, Deuteronomy, the book of Deuteronomy, the fifth book of Moses, and we begin here at chapter 3, verse 23, and this section goes all the way to chapter 7, verse 10, verse 11, okay. But like I said, we have this that's the name of tonight's parsha. So we're gonna start with the Baruch Hu, with the blessing, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bach rabanu mikol hamim, v'natan lanu et torato, Baruch atah Adonai, notein haTorah. Okay. Now, theoretically, we can read and learn Torah together. We can study together, which is very nice. Except we have a problem. Today is Tisha B'Av. And on this day, there is not supposed to be any Torah learning. There's not supposed to be any Torah learning on this day, except for sad things. And we are allowed to read on this chapter of this parsha. Happens to be one of the things that we can read. Is chapter 4, verse 25 through 40. And I am going to tell you that I'm not going to read it to you tonight because we have too much to get to. So you can read that tonight on your own after Parsha. Okay? And I said, wait a minute, there's no Parsha study tonight. So how are we going to do that? Well, there's no Torah learning. So I'm going to tell you a few things just to summarize it. And then we're going to get to the important part, which is mostly about Tisha B'Av. This Parsha begins on the east side of the Jordan River where the Jews are camped. And Moses takes this as an opportunity to recount the whole history and all the laws. And Moses appeals to God to reverse his sentence, which is that he's not allowed to go in to Israel. So he makes this imperation to God, but it doesn't come to fruition. And he gets to just stand there and look at it from afar, from a location that Chacham Leah and I have actually stood at and looked at that view. Now, so I said that, we're supposed to be reading Parsha, but today is Tisha B'Av, so we're not supposed to be reading the regular Parsha or study Torah, but we are allowed to read certain portions, and one of them happens to be in this Parsha, which is what I just said, right? It's Deuteronomy 4, 25 through 40. Why is that part read? Well, because we're only allowed to read sad things. And this part is read because it tells how Israel will lapse into exile, and then how Israel will eventually, hopefully, find its way back. So this is all I'm going to say about tonight's Parsha directly. And we're going to move on and talk about sad things. But I will also say that the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidic Judaism, and also Rabbi Simcha Bunim, whose name is Happiness, says we should stay away from sadness and depression as much as possible. So let's balance this out by having some silly sadness and some discussion. Okay, so Moses. What sad thing? Well, he doesn't get to taste the fruits of his labor. He has schlepped all of the people out of Israel. He's put up with all their mishigas for 40 years, and they're meandering, they're complaining, and he doesn't get to go into Israel. Well, if you think about it, a lot of prophets and great people don't get a chance to taste the fruits of their labor. Martin Luther King, for instance, Nicholas Copernicus. You know what? He didn't get to see the fact that his proposed heliocentric model of the solar system, which placed the sun at the center of our solar system rather than the Earth, that his seminal work, De Revolutionibus Orbium Celestium, was going to become the widely worldly accepted theory and supplant this Earth-centric model that was being, proposed by the church. Emily Dickinson, she was a prolific poet, but only a handful of her poems were published during her lifetime, and even those poems were heavily edited. She never actually got a chance to see her work published in its entirety and how much it's appreciated, and probably one of the most important works or bodies of American literature. Van Gogh sold very few paintings during his lifetime. He was almost destitute. He lived in poverty. He died without knowing that his work would later be celebrated, and the sunflower thing would break the history at being sold for $26 million, right? He would become the most celebrated, influential artist in the history of Western art. Alan Turing, right? He didn't get to see, he was a pioneering computer scientist, and he played a crucial role in the breaking of the Nazi Enigma code during World War II. He didn't get a chance to see the full impact of his contributions to computer science, to artificial intelligence, and he never got any recognition during his lifetime because of the secrecy of surrounding his work, and because he was tragically persecuted because he was gay. Right? All right. Ada Lovelace. She's credited as being the first computer programmer due to her work on the Charles Babbage's early mechanical, general purpose computer, the analytical engine, and she died without seeing the development of the modern computing industry. Hedy Lamarr, Jewish, by the way, invented Wi-Fi, which is everywhere. Okay. So it's all these things are very sad. Moses doesn't get a chance. So why are we thinking? So this brings us back to Tisha B'Av, and what is Tisha B'Av, and why we would even honor the saddest day of the year. And I mean, every major ancient holiday on the Jewish calendar, even Yom Kippur, is ultimately, which is the Day of Atonement, is ultimately about joy, except for this one weird holiday on this month. It's what's called the 9th of Av. That's the Jewish month. A series of major tragedies happened to the Jewish people, including the destruction of the first and the second temples. And so it's a day of mourning, Tisha B'Av, a day of mourning for us getting kicked out of the land of Israel, and the destruction of Jerusalem, and the medieval, all these things that went crashing down during this holiday. So we acknowledge our struggles and our suffering. And 3 weeks prior to the Tisha B'Av starts with a fast on the 17th of Tammuz. That's another month. Okay. And that's when the siege of Jerusalem in 70 CE began. Okay. Then we have these 9 days leading up to Tisha B'Av. Now, during these 9 days, there's often no weddings, no hair cutting, no shaving, no listening to music. During the 9 days, up up to this big fast that we have on Tisha B'Av, some people don't eat meat, they don't drink alcohol. So then Tisha B'Av happens. This is today, a big holiday, and there's 5 notable prohibitions. The first of which is like a 25-hour fast. Okay. So in addition to the fact that the fast is 25 hours, it begins just before the sunset on the eve of Tisha B'Av and ends after nightfall the following day. And during that time, there's no eating or drinking. There's no washing. There's no bathing. There's no application of creams or oils, and there's no wearing of leather shoes. There's also no marital sexual relationships, to which I say, Mani Shana Halayla Hazeh. Why is this night different than all other nights? Anyway, these restrictions are waived in the case of health issues, okay? But a competent, what we call pasek, a knowledgeable person, a rabbi who decides Jewish law, should be consulted. Those who are seriously ill are allowed to eat and drink, but on other fast days, almost any medical condition may justify, breaking the fast. But in practice, you're supposed to consult with a pasuk or rabbi, someone knowledgeable. So ritual washing up to the knuckles is permitted, but washing to cleanse dirt or mud from someone's body is permitted, but you can't take a bath just because it's enjoyable. Okay. In the evening, it's actually common to sit on low stools or even on the floor of the synagogue while reading the Book of Lamentations, that sad, sad Book of Lamentations. And you should do it by candlelight, so it's really sad, okay? And some people sleep on the floor, or they modify their normal sleeping routine. And they might sleep, like if they sleep with 2 pillows, they might sleep with 1 less pillow, okay? So they try to make themselves a little bit uncomfortable. They refrain from greeting each other or sending gifts. Old Siddurs, a Siddur is a prayer book, and Torah scrolls are usually buried on this day. Okay. Now, fast, although the fast is supposed to end at nightfall, according to the tradition, the first temple continued burning throughout the night. And for most of the following day, until what was known as the 10th of Av. And therefore, it's kind of customary to maintain all restrictions during the 9 days through the midday of the following day. So it's like, goes on forever. And the Book of Lamentations, which is read, like I said, in the synagogue, it mourns the destruction of Jerusalem, and it's followed by the recitation of Kidot, which is a liturgical dirges that lament the loss of the temples of Jerusalem. And this day has become associated with the remembrance of other major calamities which have befallen the Jewish people. Some Kidot also recall events such as the murder of the 10 martyrs by the Romans, the expulsion of the Jews from England and from Spain and from elsewhere, and massacres of numerous Jewish communities by the Crusaders, and of course the Holocaust. We talked about Tisha B'Av last week being the day that they started to send Jews to Treblinka, and this year, there's kind of been a pogrom that happened on October 7th. So that sad time certainly needs to be acknowledged. That is another horrific event, which Tisha B'Av gives us an opportunity to mourn and contemplate. So we started off with this Tisha B'Av being the destruction, these the acknowledgement of these various horrible things that have happened in time. And I'd like to use this as an opportunity to discuss what Jews believe, what many Jews believe is or was the cause of the destruction of the temple, King Solomon's temple. This is the cause of this destruction is this concept known as Sinat Chinam. That's Sinat Chinam is reportedly the cause of the destruction of the second temple. So what is Sinat Chinam? It's often summarized as baseless hatred, hatred without a cause. But as always, there are kind of subtleties to this concept that are not readily apparent. First, no one really has baseless hatred. There's always, nearly always, some reason to hate someone, right? I mean, one might respond with the idea that a psychopath can hate someone without cause. Okay, that's true. But I would argue that a psychopath doesn't really hate, they simply don't really care. Okay? And so not caring is actually different than hating. We've all had that experience of a certain level of Sinat Chinam where you just hate someone so much that the way they walk, the way they eat, the noises that they make, the sound when they talk, everything with their breath becomes just absolutely intolerable. That is Sinat Chinam. But is Sinat Chinam really baseless? Yes and no. I mean, your hate for that person, right, started somewhere, and it probably stems from something. It didn't come out of nowhere. I mean, certainly there's xenophobia, there's racism. There may not be any logical explanation for you to hate that person, but it's not baseless. It might be on a stupid basis. It might be on skin color or country of origin or sexual identity or status or preference or an illogical reason like a blemish or a funny looking nose. Okay. But I would argue that even a dumb reason is a basis for hatred. So what are we really talking about here? Okay. So when we explore it further in the Talmud, particularly in Gittin 55b and 56a, it gives a classic example of what Sinat Chinam means. Surprisingly, in the examples that are given, it's not baseless hatred at all. Rather, it's really rather disproportionate responses. Disproportionate responses. The smackdown. And this is evident in the story about a man who had a friend named Kamsa, and he had an enemy named Bar Kamsa. Okay, I'll tell you the story because this is what we're going to do, because it's not in the Torah and it's not Torah learning. Okay, but we're kind of learning something about the Torah in a roundabout way. All right, so here we go. This is how we're getting around it. So the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, which is used to explain Sinat Chinam, baseless hatred, which I've already said is not baseless hatred at all, but disproportionate hatred. Okay. This person is holding a big feast, okay, and he requests that his servant invites his best friend, Kamsa, but the servant mistakenly invites the host's worst enemy, whose name is Bar Kamsa. Okay, that's why he mixes it up. Okay, so he invites Bar Kamsa instead, and during the feast, the host sees his enemy, Bar Kamsa, and he orders him to leave. He says, "Get the heck out of here! You're my enemy. Leave." And Bar Kamsa responds that he wishes to stay, and that he offers to pay for his share of the cost of the party, of the feast, like his own plate. And he explains the confusion, that he just mistook, the servant went to the wrong guy, and it's a mistake. But the host refuses. Now, Bar Kamsa counters by offering to pay for half the cost of the entire celebration that's going on. It's pretty generous. But again, the host refuses. Now, Bar Kamsa responds by offering to pay for the entire feast. He's going to pick up the whole tab for everybody, okay? But this time, the host refuses, and he picks up Bar Kamsa, and he physically throws him out. And Bar Kamsa gets pretty upset. Pretty upsetting. He gets pissed off, and he thinks to himself, "I can't believe it. I just can't believe it." All the rabbis were here, right? And they saw what happened. They saw this whole misunderstanding, and they did nothing. They didn't do anything. And he was so angered by the unfairness of all of it that he vowed to get revenge on that whole party by appealing to the Roman authorities. Okay, the Romans are in charge. And Bar Kamsa starts talking some crap and tells the Roman leader that the Jews are all plotting against him. Okay, and the Roman leader is very suspicious of Bar Kamsa, so he questions, his veracity of this story. And Bar Kamsa says, "Listen, Roman guy, let's make a test, and we'll see if it's true that the Jews are plotting against the Romans, okay? Here's what we're going to do. Why don't you send the Jews an offering for their temple and see if they accept it or if they refuse it?" Okay? Right? The Roman, it's a nice thing. It's a nice gesture. So the Roman leader sends Bar Kamsa back with 3 calves as gifts to be sacrificed. Now, knowing that it's forbidden to sacrifice an animal that has a single blemish on the way to the temple. Sacrificial animals in the Roman tradition have to have certain requirements. Those requirements are different than sacrificial animals in the Jewish tradition, okay? So Bar Kamsa knows this, and he cuts the upper lip of each animal that the Romans have donated in goodwill to the Jews. And this cut on the upper lip renders each animal totally ineligible for traditional Jewish sacrifice. Bar Kamsa knows this, okay? So the high priests are now presented with these animals that are totally unfit for sacrifice. So there's this huge dilemma, right? These are gifts from the government, and they don't want to offend the Romans. So what are they going to do? They use their svara, right? The priests decide to overturn the rules of sacrifice because they would rather make peace and not offend the Romans by not accepting their sacrifice, because their sacrifice isn't good enough, right? So they don't want to tell the Romans that their sacrifice is unacceptable. So they decide to go forward and accept it, except for one priest. One scholar, rabbi, objects. And that's not going to happen. He says, listen, this is how it's written. This is what we're supposed to do. We're not supposed to deviate. This is why, Aaron's sons got into big trouble. So we should not deviate from what we're told to do. Now, their priests started looking for another solution, which included killing Bar Kamsa, so that he couldn't report back to Rome that they didn't accept the Roman sacrifice. But this same priest objected. Okay, and this time I agree with that priest. So they were stuck. They rejected the offering, and they sent the 3 cows back with Bar Kamsa. And Bar Kamsa is successful in his efforts to manipulate the Roman authorities, who realize or feel that the Jews are indeed plotting against them because they refused their nice gift. So they approach Jerusalem with the intent to invade it. And in a famous example of biblically approved divination called belomancy, which is the shooting of arrows, which you would know if you had attended my last lecture on Saturday, which was 35 different methods of divination in 2.5 hours. On his way to Jerusalem, this Roman decides to use some belomancy, figures out what to do. What is he going to do? And he shoots an arrow in each of the 4 directions: north, south, east, west. And surprisingly, whoosh, they all land on the same spot, even though they're all shot in different directions, and they're all pointing at Jerusalem. And so all he could do is conclude that it's God's will that Jerusalem be destroyed. And now, just as he was puzzling about why God would want to destroy his own people, a little Jewish boy walked by. And in an example of biblically approved divination known as Klaidon, which is bibliomancy, inspirational bibliomancy without a book. Okay. The Roman asked a little child who was passing by what he had been studying at school that day. And the child responded that they had been studying the verse from Ezekiel 25:14, which says, I will wreak my vengeance on Edom, that's Rome, through my people of Israel, and they shall take action against Edom in accordance with my blazing anger, and they, meaning Rome, shall know my vengeance, declares the Lord God. Whoa, 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 whoa. So first he shoots the arrows, and they all say, go destroy Jerusalem. Then he sees this child, and the child recounts this biblical verse that says, I, God, am going to wreak my vengeance on Rome through the people of Israel and take action against the Romans, and they'll know my vengeance. So putting 2 to 2 together, he doesn't want to start any shit. He realizes that this means that God is looking to destroy his own house and his own people and blame the Romans, and then God is going to wreak his vengeance on Rome. And he's not interested in being God's patsy or dealing with God's disproportionate vengeance for carrying out the divine's own wishes. So the Roman smartly bails on the idea, and he eventually actually converts to Judaism. That's an aside and not the main part of the story. But the four examples that are used in this story to explain what Sinat Chinam is are as follows. The first incident is at the feast, okay? What is truly being illustrated here is disproportionate anger and indignation, which is presumed to be righteous and correct. It's not Bar Hamsa's fault that he showed up to a feast to which he was mistakenly invited. Like, he didn't know. And then he knows, you know, the host knows that he didn't invite Bar Hamsa. So his conclusion isn't that his enemy is just showing up uninvited just to ruin the whole feast on purpose. So rather than the situation being diffused and ended upon just hearing the explanation of the confusion, the host reacts with just absolute disproportionate anger. And he does this like repeatedly. So that's the first example. But he's right to be angry, but just not that angry. The second incident of disproportionate anger and indignation, which is presumed to be righteous and correct, is by Bar Hamsa himself. He's very right to be angry that the rabbis didn't stand up and intervene, right? He's very right to be angry at his host for being an obstinate, mean-spirited jerk. He's right for that. But to trick the Romans into launching an attack on an entire community, it seems a little disproportionate, right? Like, okay, well, we're going to wipe all of you out. I mean, come on. So the third incident is when the Roman decides to launch an attack for refusing their gift, right? Because, you know, are they correct in their anger? Yeah. You know, their gift got returned to them. But the response, which is to go wipe out a whole people for not accepting 3 cows? Come on. Little disproportionate. It's not wrong, okay? I mean, there's a basis. So it's not baseless hatred. The third, all right, and the final incident is exemplified by God's own actions, right? God is looking to destroy his own people by using the Romans to fulfill his will and attack the Jews. But then the divine is going to turn around and destroy the Romans for doing God's own will. Well, that certainly seems like an unbelievably disproportionate response. So the question is, who's the true hero of the story, in my opinion? What is not the Torah telling us, but what is the Talmud telling us in the story? I'll tell you what it's telling us. It's telling us who the true hero is. Who is the true hero? The true hero is the Roman who walks away from all of this disproportionate hatred. And in doing so, he becomes a truly righteous person. He says, I'm not going to participate in all this nonsense. I'm not doing that. I don't care who told me to go destroy. I'm not doing it. And that type of person is Martin Luther King. That type of person is Tzaddikim. That type of person is the righteous. Okay, that's the true righteous. So we started off with the sadness of Tisha B'Av, and Tisha B'Av being a reminder of sad things. And again, if you want to participate in that, you can go read the Book of Lamentations, and you can read the section, tonight, as I told you, 25 through 40 on your own, and you can choose to be sad. But now you know why we're sad. We're sad because the temple was destroyed. All of these terrible things seem to happen. We acknowledge that sad things do happen in the world, and we choose to persist. And we choose the optimism of Miriam, who carried with her her tambourine, because she knows that things can turn around at any time. And at any time, you got to be prepared to party at any time. So I'm going to open it up here for questions. Rav Aaron is in Morocco and cannot join us, and Rabbi Danino is still in Israel, and I'm not sure if Rabbi McLashley what he is up to, but he may be koshering a place because he's the one that gives approval for that. So if you have any questions, go ahead. Feel free to unmute yourself. Tomorrow night is Ma'ariv service. Please don't forget. I know that 2.5 hours of 35 different things of divination is like a marathon. And it was a marathon for me, and I know it's probably like twice a marathon for you to watch it. But you might want to, I don't know, put it on in the background as you're driving, or I mean, most of it is non-visual. There's only like 3 or 4 times where I hold something up and give an example. But so I think you could I think it's like, it could be an audio book. So go for that. So I've still given you all time to unmute yourself and ask questions. No one has. So then we can go ahead and conclude. Now you know all about Tisha B'Av, and you know all about baseless hatred, Sinat Chinam, and that is the reason for the fall of the temples. And you also know that not everybody gets appreciated in their own lifetime. And that was taught to me as I was very young by my mentor, who was a neurosurgeon. When I was about 13, I had a friend who was a great mentor and good friend. He was my best friend. And it was a very unusual relationship. Yeah, a young kid hanging out with a neurosurgeon. I got that. But I forgot where I was going with that story, but I forgot. I lost my train of thought. But anyway, he imparted to me. Oh, I know what it was. He told me that it's okay. Truly great people are never recognized in their own time, right? Because they're way ahead, right? And so that's why it's important to write books, he told me, because people are reaching out to you across time. You can, across time, they're telling you their story, and they're reaching out. And this is our connection to the past, and it's our connection to the future. So I encourage you to put down your thoughts. Someday they may be important to someone. All right. Well, thank you very much. See you all, I hope, tomorrow night for Ma'ariv service.